God's love tells you, even the most broken soul can bloom again. There comes a moment when life stops being gentle, when the weight you've carried for too long begins to crush what you once believed was unbreakable inside you. You feel the strength leaving your body, your faith trembling, your voice fading into a silence that no one seems to hear. You try to convince yourself that it's just another difficult season, that if you hold on long enough the pain will lessen, but something inside whispers that this time is different. You're not just tired, you're broken. And in that quiet breaking, something begins to shift. Because the moment everything falls apart is often the same moment that love begins to rebuild from the inside. The truth is, you were never asked to hold yourself together. You were never meant to be the source of your own healing. What breaks you does not define you, it reveals the ground where God will plant something new. The brokenness you hide in shame becomes the soil where His love takes root. Every shattered piece becomes a seed, and though you can't see it yet, something alive is growing beneath the ruins. Pain always feels like an ending, but it is often the preparation for something sacred. You may not see movement, but the unseen is always the most powerful. Love works quietly, reshaping what you thought was destroyed, turning ashes into foundation. It doesn't rebuild you into who you were before the storm. It creates someone entirely new, someone softer, wiser, and deeper than you could have been without it. You are not being restored to what was. You are being reborn into what will be. The world teaches you to hide your scars, but God's love teaches you to see them as proof. Every scar is a reminder that the darkness didn't win. What you survived has already proven that you carry more strength than you once believed. You are not broken beyond repair. You are being shaped into someone who understands pain, who carries compassion, who loves without fear because they've seen what love can do in the ruins. That is the quiet miracle happening inside you. You can't rush this process. Healing is not a race. It's a surrender. It begins the moment you stop running from what hurts and allow love to meet you there. The broken soul blooms not by force but by acceptance. You do not need to be perfect for God to love you. You only need to be honest. Admit that you are tired. Admit that you've lost faith. And in that honesty, you'll find that you were never abandoned. The presence you feared was gone has been there all along, waiting for you to stop fighting long enough to feel it. The pain you've carried was never wasted. Every tear watered something invisible. Every sleepless night was shaping a kind of strength that calm seasons never could. What you thought was breaking you was actually blessing you in disguise. You can't yet see the flower forming beneath the soil, but it's there, absorbing every drop of what once felt like loss. Because love never wastes a wound. It transforms it. So when you look at your reflection and see the cracks, understand what they truly are. They are openings for light. The places that broke are the same places where grace enters. Every part of you that you once hid in shame is now being rewritten by a love that never stopped believing in your return. You were never forgotten. You were never too far gone. You were never too damaged to be made whole. You will bloom again, but not as who you once were. You will bloom as someone who has known the fire and found peace in the ashes. Someone who understands that true beauty is not perfection, it's resilience. Someone who carries light not because they've never seen darkness, but because they've walked through it and found love waiting on the other side. What was once your deepest wound will become the place where others find their way to healing. Because when God restores, He doesn't just rebuild what was lost, He multiplies it. You're not ruined, you're becoming. And everything that was meant to destroy you will one day prove that you were always meant to bloom again. There is a point when silence turns heavy, when you stop waiting for the sound of an answer and begin to wonder if you were ever meant to hear one. You wake up with the same questions, carry them through the day, lay them beside you at night. Hope flickers, not gone, but smaller now, like a candle fighting the wind. It's in this silence that the mind starts to lie, telling you that if God truly loved you, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't feel this forgotten. But love is not gone. It is working in ways hidden from your sight, growing roots beneath the surface while you mistake stillness for absence. The hardest part of faith is not believing that God can. It's believing that He will, even when nothing looks alive. You crave control, you crave evidence, but God doesn't reveal everything at once because faith only grows in mystery. If He showed you the full picture, there would be no need to trust. So He allows the uncertainty to remain, not as punishment but as protection. He is not testing your strength, He is building it quietly, layer by layer, through every unanswered prayer. You may think your heart is shattering, but what you're really hearing is the sound of walls collapsing. The walls that once kept you safe are now keeping you trapped. Pain, for all its cruelty, has a strange mercy. It breaks what needs to be broken so that light can finally reach the places you've hidden. That is how God's love works. It takes what was meant to destroy and uses it to deliver. The suffering that once made you doubt His presence becomes the very evidence of it. One day you will look back and see that the nights that nearly broke you were sacred. They were the nights when love sat silently beside you, saying nothing because it was teaching you to listen differently. You were not being abandoned, you were being drawn closer, taught to find peace without proof, to stand without sight. Faith was never about seeing the way. It was about knowing you were never walking it alone. So stay in the silence a little longer. Don't rush to escape it. Every pause, every delay, every ache is shaping something beautiful. The silence you fear is not the end of the story. It is the soil where your new beginning takes root. You think you are waiting for God, but He has been waiting for you. To stop striving. To stop trying to rebuild what He is still remaking. The bloom you long for is already forming beneath the surface. You can't see it yet, but it's there, wrapped in grace, unfolding in perfect time. And when it rises, you will understand that the silence was never empty. It was love preparing the ground for your rebirth. There is a breaking point in every soul, a moment when endurance feels like cruelty and hope becomes too heavy to carry. You tell yourself to keep believing, to hold on a little longer, but inside you are unraveling. The same prayers that once brought comfort now feel like echoes of disappointment. You whisper to heaven, but the words fall lifeless at your feet. That's when faith begins to tremble. Not because it's weak, but because it's real. You were never called to be unshakable. You were called to be honest. God's love doesn't demand perfection. It invites authenticity. When your voice cracks in prayer, He listens more closely. When your hands tremble, He steadies them. When you can't find the strength to believe, He believes for you. The cracks that make you feel unworthy are the very places where His light enters and begins to heal. Trembling faith may look small, but heaven calls it powerful. It's the faith that keeps walking while afraid. The faith that chooses to whisper, "I still trust you," even when the silence feels endless. God is not measuring how strong you are. He's measuring how close you stay. Every step through the valley, even the hesitant ones, count as worship. The enemy wants you to believe that doubt disqualifies you. But doubt does not drive God away. It draws Him closer. He doesn't wait for your confidence to return. He meets you in your confusion. He is not ashamed of your questions. He's not disappointed by your tears. He is near to the trembling because the trembling still reach for Him. So when faith shakes, do not run. Stand where you are and let love hold you. The storm may roar, but it cannot drown the truth. You are not losing faith. You are learning how to trust beyond what you can see. This is the sacred refining of the soul, where belief stops being an idea and becomes a heartbeat. One day you will look back and see that the moments when you thought your faith was breaking were the moments when it was being strengthened. The trembling was not a failure. It was proof that you kept standing when everything else told you to fall. That's the kind of faith that moves mountains, not because it is loud, but because it refuses to die in the dark. The trembling will pass, but what it leaves behind will stay. A quieter, deeper trust. A peace that does not depend on sight. A faith that no longer asks for signs, only for presence. And in that presence you will understand that you were never expected to be fearless, only faithful. Every season of breaking carries within it the ache of waiting. You wake each morning hoping that something will change, that the weight will lift, that the ache will soften. But the days pass, and the silence stretches longer than you thought possible. Waiting begins to feel like punishment. The heart becomes restless, and you start to wonder if maybe you've been forgotten. Yet in that slow ache, God's love is still working, still shaping, still preparing what only time can reveal. The waiting is not wasted. It is the sacred space where transformation takes root. When God delays, He is not withholding what you need. He is preparing you to hold it without breaking. What you call delay, heaven calls development. Every quiet hour is forming patience. Every unanswered prayer is deepening faith. You are not standing still. You are being stretched to the measure of your calling. It hurts because growth always does. The seed must first break before it can bloom. The waiting room of God feels like darkness, but beneath that darkness, roots are forming. You can't see them, but they are anchoring you for what's coming. If you rush the process, the flower withers before it ever opens. Love is not in a hurry. It grows what lasts. When everything feels motionless, it's tempting to fill the silence, to run, to fix, to force an outcome that feels like progress. But forced things fall apart quickly. What love is building inside you is eternal. It cannot be rushed. Every delay carries divine intention. God is not late. He is aligning every detail with precision. His timing may feel slow, but it's never wrong. There will be days when your strength feels thin and your patience exhausted. In those moments, remind yourself that waiting is not weakness. It is trust in motion. It is faith that believes God's promise more than your pain. The world measures success by how fast things happen. Heaven measures it by how deeply you remain rooted in belief. You are not forgotten in this waiting. Heaven has heard every prayer, counted every tear, and marked every moment of surrender. The unseen work happening inside you is greater than the answers you long for. When the time comes, the doors that open will not need force. They will swing wide because love has already prepared them. When the waiting finally ends, it won't just bring what you asked for. It will bring peace about why you had to wait. You'll see that the delay was not denial. It was protection. You'll realize that what you thought was silence was God's gentle voice saying, "Stay still. I'm not finished yet. Hold steady. The soil may feel heavy, but it's holy. The roots you can't see are growing deep, and one day soon the bloom will rise from it all, stronger, brighter, unshakable." That's the promise of love. Nothing is ever lost in the waiting. Everything is preparing you to bloom again. Doubt often walks in quietly, disguised as reason. It starts as a small question that grows heavier with every passing day. If God really loved me, why hasn't anything changed? If He truly hears me, why is He silent? You don't mean to question His goodness, yet the ache inside you begins to speak louder than the faith you once had. You try to pray, but your words feel hollow, trapped between hope and hesitation. You are not alone in this struggle. Every heart that has ever loved God deeply has also doubted Him at some point. Faith was never meant to erase doubt. It was meant to stand beside it. The presence of doubt does not mean the absence of faith. It means your heart is still searching for truth, and that search, no matter how fragile, still matters. God's love is not intimidated by your questions. He does not pull away from your uncertainty. He leans in closer. He is not disappointed by your weakness. He meets you in it. He doesn't need your certainty to work miracles. He only asks for your honesty. When you bring Him your fears, your exhaustion, your confusion, you're not failing Him. You're inviting Him into the very space that needs healing. The enemy wants you to believe that questioning God means losing faith. But the truth is, asking where He is often leads to finding Him more clearly. The silence you mistake for distance may be the very moment He's teaching you to hear Him in new ways. When you run out of words, He listens to your tears. When you stop trying to perform faith and simply sit in His presence, He begins to speak again, not through noise but through knowing. You can't reason your way out of doubt because doubt doesn't live in the mind, it lives in the heart. And the heart doesn't heal through logic, it heals through love. The more you try to suppress your questions, the louder they grow. The moment you hand them over to God, they lose their power. Faith isn't pretending the questions don't exist. It's choosing to trust despite not having the answers. One day you'll understand that doubt was never the enemy. Despair was. Doubt brought you searching, but despair wanted you to stop. You chose to keep seeking, and that alone is proof that the flame inside you never died. Every time you whispered, "God, are you still there?" heaven heard a declaration louder than you knew. "I still want you." In time, the fog will lift and you'll realize that God never left. He was holding your faith together while you thought it was falling apart. The questions that once scared you will turn into testimonies of grace. You'll no longer fear the silence because you'll have learned to recognize His voice even there. So don't fight the doubt. Bring it into the light. The same God who held you when you believed will hold you when you question. His love is not fragile. It does not depend on your confidence, it depends on His character. You can rest in that truth. Your faith may tremble, but His love never will. Pain has a way of convincing you that it will last forever. It builds walls around the heart, whispering that no light can reach you again. But even in the thickest darkness, God's love never stops moving. It does not wait for your strength to return. It begins its quiet work in the very place where you feel undone. Healing does not begin when everything is fixed. It begins when you finally allow love to meet you where you are broken. Every scar tells a story, not of failure, but of survival. The world teaches you to hide your pain, to smile when you're bleeding inside, to keep moving even when you can barely breathe. But God calls you to stop pretending. He asks you to bring the wound into His light, not to expose your weakness, but to reveal His strength. The broken soul is not abandoned. It is being remade from the inside out. Healing is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It begins in the quiet moments when you choose forgiveness over bitterness, surrender over control, faith over fear. The process feels invisible because it happens in the unseen places of the soul. But one morning you'll wake up and realize that what once hurt no longer has power over you. That is the silent miracle of love. It transforms without demanding recognition. The truth is, healing hurts. You must face what broke you before you can release it. Love does not erase the past. It redefines it. Every disappointment, every loss, every unanswered prayer becomes part of the design that shaped you into who you are now. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. The pain you feel is not evidence of God's absence. It is proof of His persistence. One day the memories that used to wound you will no longer sting. They will remind you how far you've come. You'll look at your scars and see not shame but beauty, the kind of beauty that only grace can create. You'll understand that healing was never about forgetting. It was about remembering differently. You'll remember with peace instead of pain. God's love does not rush you. It will wait as long as it takes. Even when you resist, even when you hide, it stays. It moves through the cracks, softening what has hardened, reviving what has died. And though it feels like nothing is changing, every tear waters the seed of your becoming. Healing is already happening. It just takes time for the bloom to show. So let the healing come. Don't fight it. Don't fear it. The wound that once felt like a curse is becoming a doorway to freedom. The love that feels distant is already within you, mending what was broken, stitching together the fragments of your soul into something whole again. You may not see it yet, but you are already rising. You are already blooming. And when the world sees you again, they will not see your pain. They will see the masterpiece that love made from it. There comes a point in every journey of healing when the soul begins to breathe again. It doesn't happen all at once. It starts quietly, like the first light after a long night. You notice that your chest feels lighter, that the weight you carried has shifted, that peace, soft and steady, is returning where pain once ruled. It is the gentle evidence that God's love has been working all along, rebuilding what the world thought was beyond repair. Love rebuilds slowly, because it is not patchwork. It is transformation. The pieces that shattered inside you are not being glued back together the way they were before. They are being reshaped into something stronger, something truer. God does not restore what was. He restores what should have been. He takes every wound, every heartbreak, every sleepless night, and weaves it into a design that speaks of purpose instead of pain. At first it feels unfamiliar. You've spent so long surviving that peace almost feels unsafe. You catch yourself waiting for something to go wrong, for the pain to return. But love whispers differently now. It tells you that calm is not the absence of struggle. It's the sign that you've been changed by it. What used to break you no longer holds the same power, because grace has rewritten the meaning of those moments. This rebuilding is sacred. It's not about forgetting who you were. It's about meeting yourself again through the eyes of love. The version of you that emerges from this process will not apologize for the scars. They are proof of your resurrection. They are reminders that the light inside you is real, that it survived the fire, that it refuses to die. And through every scar, God's love reflects its own strength. Sometimes you'll still feel the echoes of what hurt you. The memories will visit, soft and sudden. But now they don't have the same voice. They no longer accuse. They testify. They say, "I was there when everything fell apart, and yet you're still here." That's the quiet triumph of healing. It doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. As you walk forward, you begin to notice how differently you move through the world. You speak with more compassion. You listen with more understanding. You love with less fear. Pain humbled you, but love rebuilt you. You no longer chase what once broke you because you've learned the difference between what looks alive and what truly gives life. This is the hidden work of divine restoration. Love does not just repair, it renews. What was once fragile becomes foundation. What was once weakness becomes wisdom. You begin to see the beauty of your story not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And in that reality, you finally understand that God never wanted to make you flawless. He wanted to make you whole. You have become living proof that even what breaks can bloom again. And though you may not recognize it yet, the garden of your soul is already growing, full of color, full of grace, full of quiet strength that was born only through the waiting, the pain, and the love that never gave up on you. There is a beauty that only reveals itself in the ruins. When everything you once depended on has fallen, when the people you counted on have gone silent, when the plans you made lie scattered at your feet, something inside you begins to awaken. It's not the kind of strength that shouts or demands attention. It's the quiet realization that you are still standing. Against all odds, you're still here. And in that moment, God's love begins to show you that even the most broken soul can bloom again, right in the middle of the wreckage. What once felt like the end becomes the beginning. You start to notice that the emptiness is no longer just a void. It's space being cleared for something new. The ashes that once covered your joy begin to nourish the roots of your rebirth. Every loss that tore through you created openings for light to enter. What was taken has made room for something greater, something eternal. The garden you thought was destroyed is quietly alive again beneath the soil. You don't have to search for evidence of renewal. It will find you. In the smallest ways, in the ordinary moments, in the laughter you didn't expect to return. Healing doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it appears in whispers. You'll catch yourself smiling for no reason, breathing a little deeper, feeling a quiet gratitude that doesn't need explanation. That's how love moves, invisibly, powerfully, restoring what life tried to steal. The truth is, rebirth rarely looks like you imagined. It doesn't erase the past. It honors it. You carry your history differently now. The wounds that once defined you have become landmarks of grace. They remind you that you have been to the bottom and found God there. You've seen the edge of despair and discovered that love was deeper still. You don't need to be who you were before the breaking. You are more than that now. This is what blooming looks like. Not perfection, but perseverance. Not control, but surrender. Not strength as the world defines it, but a holy resilience that grows from trusting that even what dies can rise again. The petals of your life unfold slowly, gently, one moment at a time. You begin to see beauty not as something to chase, but as something you've become. The ruins are no longer reminders of failure. They are altars of transformation. Where you once saw loss, you now see love. Where you once saw endings, you now see resurrection. You realize that God never promised a life without storms. He promised that His love would be your shelter through them all. The storm was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to strip away what was false so the truth could grow. Now, as you look around the garden of your soul, you see signs of life everywhere. The same ground that once held your pain now holds your purpose. The same tears that once fell in despair have become rivers of renewal. And as the light touches what once was broken, you understand. The bloom was never about returning to who you were. It was about becoming who you were always meant to be. The deeper your healing grows, the more you begin to see beauty where pain once blinded you. You notice how each scar on your heart carries a memory, not just of what hurt you, but of what healed you afterward. This is the quiet revelation of grace, that nothing you've lived through is wasted. Even the moments that felt meaningless now glow with purpose. You start to understand that God's love never erased your pain. It transformed it into wisdom. Every wound you've carried becomes a bridge to compassion. You begin to recognize the same ache in others, the silent battles behind their smiles, the fear in their voices when they talk about hope. And because you've walked through the fire, you no longer judge their smoke. You've learned that love doesn't lecture, it listens. Healing has made your heart tender, not fragile, strong enough to hold others' pain without losing its peace. What once made you hide now makes you reach out. You no longer see vulnerability as weakness but as a sacred offering. When you share your story, it doesn't come from pride or pity, it comes from gratitude. You speak not to prove you've survived, but to show that love never failed. Every scar becomes a testimony that even when you broke, God's hands never let you fall apart completely. He held you through every shatter, shaping something beautiful through what felt unbearable. The more you remember, the more you realize that pain was never the enemy. It was the teacher. It taught you to slow down, to see differently, to value gentleness over strength. You stopped chasing perfection because you now understand that brokenness brought you closer to truth. What the world calls flaws, heaven calls fingerprints of grace. This is the Garden of Scars, where every healed place tells a story of survival, and every imperfection shines with divine artistry. You look at your life and see how far you've come, how every season of despair carried a hidden blessing you couldn't recognize then. You see how love turned your deepest wounds into the most powerful proof that God restores completely, even when you least expect it. You no longer fear being broken again because you know now that brokenness isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming real. And when you encounter others who are still in their storm, you don't try to fix them. You sit beside them, the way love once sat beside you. You let your presence speak the words they're not ready to believe. You will bloom again too. And in that moment, you realize your healing was never meant for you alone. It was meant to become hope for someone else. That is the ultimate redemption, when your scars become light, when your pain becomes purpose, when your story becomes the evidence that love truly can make all things new. The light that returns after a long night feels different. It's softer, quieter, more deliberate. It doesn't burst through the clouds. It seeps in slowly, touching everything that once seemed lost. This is what it means to awaken after being broken. You start to feel alive again, but not in the same way as before. You see the world differently now. Every detail, the warmth of the morning air, the sound of the wind through the trees, the rhythm of your own breath, feels sacred. God's love has changed the way you see, not by erasing the dark, but by teaching you how to find light within it. For a long time, you believed that healing meant returning to who you were before the pain. But now you understand that you were never meant to go back. You were meant to become. The old you survived by strength. The new you lives by surrender. What once made you anxious no longer owns your peace. You've learned that control was never security. It was fear disguised as effort. Now, when uncertainty comes, you breathe deeper instead of bracing for the storm. Because you've learned that even when you can't see what's ahead, love has already walked there first. This is where your spirit begins to settle into peace that does not depend on outcomes. You no longer chase signs to prove God is near. You simply know. The stillness that once frightened you now feels familiar. It's the sound of His presence. The world still moves fast, people still disappoint, plans still change, but your soul remains anchored. The same winds that once threatened to break you now remind you how deeply your roots have grown. Peace is not an escape from pain. It's the awareness that pain no longer controls you. It's the calm that rises from trust, the quiet strength that flows from knowing you are never abandoned. God's love did not remove every hardship. It gave you endurance for them. And in that endurance, you found a deeper kind of joy, the kind that survives any storm because it's not built on circumstance but on communion. You start to realize that gratitude is not reserved for good days. It's the language of survival, the song of the redeemed. You thank God not only for what worked out but also for what didn't, because now you see how every delay, every heartbreak, every closed door led you closer to this peace. You would not trade your journey for anything because it taught you the kind of love that never leaves, never fails, and never forgets. And when you look around, the light is everywhere. It touches your story, your scars, your future. You no longer see brokenness, you see beauty reborn. The darkness did not destroy you. It revealed the radiance that was hidden all along. What once felt like the end has become the proof that love really does conquer everything. There is a quiet strength that grows after you've been restored, a peace that doesn't need to announce itself. You no longer chase healing because you've learned that you already carry it within you. The battles that once left you breathless now meet a soul that stands still. You've learned how to move through pain without becoming it. The grace that carried you through the storm now carries you through the calm, teaching you to live from love rather than for it. This is the sacred maturity that God's love creates, a calm power that doesn't need to prove itself, only to be. You begin to walk differently. Your pace slows, your reactions soften. You stop fighting the flow of life and start trusting the current. The same world that once overwhelmed you now feels bearable because your heart has changed. You don't need to control what happens next. You've learned to rest in the one who does. And from that rest comes clarity, not the kind that answers every question, but the kind that no longer needs to. Every morning feels like a quiet invitation to live intentionally. You no longer carry your past as a burden, but as a compass. It reminds you where you've been, but it no longer decides where you're going. Each day becomes a prayer, not made of words, but of presence. You look at the simple things, the sunlight through the window, the warmth of a cup in your hands, the breath that still fills your lungs, and you understand that this is enough. You are enough. Grace now guides your steps. When others hurt you, you no longer seek revenge. You seek understanding. When fear knocks, you answer with truth. When uncertainty rises, you choose surrender. The strength you carry is quiet, but unmistakable. It isn't loud confidence, it's divine stability. You are learning that power doesn't come from having control, it comes from having peace. You walk with mercy because you remember what it felt like to need it. You speak gently because you remember the sting of harshness. You give because you once had nothing but faith. The one who has been broken and restored never forgets the value of kindness. That is how God's love rebuilds you, not to return to what you were, but to become a living expression of His heart in motion. And in that movement, you discover something new. The beauty of peace that doesn't depend on perfection. You no longer measure your worth by what you achieve, but by the depth of your compassion. You find joy in ordinary moments because you understand how extraordinary it is simply to be alive. The storms will still come, but you won't face them the same way. You've already learned that love stands in every shadow, turning even fear into faith. This is the new rhythm of your life. Steady, grounded, radiant. Not untouched by pain, but undefeated by it. You walk as one who knows that the same love that healed you will sustain you. Every step you take now carries the quiet evidence that transformation is real. And when others look at you, they won't see your wounds. They'll see the light that came through them. There comes a moment when you finally see your life from a higher place. You look back on every valley, every unanswered prayer, every night you thought you wouldn't make it, and you understand. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't abandonment. It was preparation. Every delay was divine design. Every wound was a doorway. Every silence was the soil where strength was planted. What once felt like a season of breaking now reveals itself as the foundation of your becoming. You see now how God's love never left you, not for a single breath. It waited patiently while you fought, while you doubted, while you tried to hold yourself together. It stayed when you pushed it away. It carried you when you couldn't stand. It whispered when you couldn't pray. And now, looking back, you realize that love was not something you had to earn. It was the air you were breathing the entire time. The healing you've received has changed the way you love. You no longer rush through life trying to fix everything or everyone. You've learned that presence heals more deeply than words ever could. You listen more. You forgive faster. You walk lighter. You know that peace isn't the absence of storms. It's the awareness that even in chaos you are held. You've become a living reflection of the grace that once rescued you. Now you understand why God allowed the breaking, because He was building something eternal inside you. The version of you that stands here now was born from ashes, and yet there's no trace of despair left, only light. You no longer ask why things happened the way they did. You thank Him that they did, because without them, you would have never discovered how unshakable His love truly is. You are no longer a survivor of your story. You are the proof of redemption. Every part of your journey, every fall, every tear, every desperate prayer has become sacred. The pain that once silenced you now gives your voice authority. You speak with gentleness, not because you've forgotten the suffering, but because you've seen what love can do with it. You've seen dead things breathe again. You've seen the impossible unfold quietly before your eyes. You've seen what it means to bloom after the fire. And this is the truth that will carry you forward. You were never broken beyond repair. You were being refined into radiance. You were never forgotten in the waiting. You were being written into eternity. God's love has turned your pain into purpose, your fear into faith, your wounds into wisdom. And now, your life is no longer a question of what if. It's a declaration of what is. So stand tall in your becoming. Let your story shine. Let the scars speak of glory. Let your heart remain soft even after all it's endured. Because the miracle was never just that you survived. It's that you learned to love again. And in that love, you found God. Not as an idea, but as the pulse of everything that's still alive in you. You were never buried. You were planted. And now, the bloom that rises from your soul will tell the world the truth that carried you through it all. Even the most broken soul can bloom again. There is a moment after healing when silence returns. Not the heavy kind that once frightened you, but a sacred stillness that feels like peace. The noise of striving is gone.
The endless searching has ended. You are no longer waiting for proof that you are loved. You are simply living from it. This is the quiet freedom that God's love gives, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be certain, the kind that has learned that wholeness is not something you chase but something you become. You no longer look back with regret. You no longer look forward with fear.
You stand in the present, grounded in gratitude, aware of how every chapter, even the painful ones, were necessary to bring you here. You understand now that faith was never about avoiding the storm. It was about learning to dance in the rain, trusting that even the thunder has rhythm when love conducts the sky. Life hasn't become perfect, but your perspective has. You still face challenges, but you face them differently. You don't beg for the storm to stop, you ask for strength to grow within it. You don't question the path anymore, you trust the one who walks it with you. You have learned that surrender is not giving up. It's giving over. It's choosing peace over control, love over fear, trust over doubt. Now when pain visits again, and it will, you meet it with wisdom instead of panic. You remind yourself that you've been here before, and that love has never failed you. The same grace that lifted you then will lift you now. You no longer see brokenness as tragedy. You see it as the invitation to become softer, truer, more alive. Every ending, every loss, every new beginning feels like another brushstroke in a masterpiece that is still being painted by unseen hands. You begin to understand that the purpose of your pain was never punishment. It was preparation. You were being taught to see through love's eyes, to recognize that what breaks the body can awaken the soul, that what empties you can make room for something eternal. You realize that true peace is not about what happens to you. It's about what happens within you when love becomes your anchor. And as the final chapter closes, you look at your life with a calm heart. You are no longer the person who entered the fire afraid. You are the one who walked through it and found the light on the other side. You no longer need to ask, why me? Because now you whisper, thank you. You understand that every season had meaning, every tear had purpose, and every moment was shaping you for this stillness, this strength, this quiet joy that nothing can take away. Because this is what it means to bloom after being broken, not to return to what you were, but to rise as something new, whole, rooted, radiant. A living testimony that love never fails, never fades, and never stops working in those who dare to trust it, even in the dark. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. This is the promise that carried you through the darkness, the assurance that no wound is too deep for the hands of love. What broke you was never meant to end you, it was meant to open you. Every tear watered a seed, every silence prepared the soil. And now, what once felt like loss has become the place where beauty grows. You are no longer defined by what hurt you, but by what healed you. You no longer walk through life searching for light. You have become it. This is what happens when a soul chooses to trust even when it cannot see, to love even when it has been shattered, to rise even when the world said it couldn't. Let this be your peace. Nothing in your story was wasted. The pain had purpose, the waiting had meaning, and love was there in it all, quietly shaping you into the miracle you've become. You were never forgotten. You were never forsaken. You were never broken beyond repair. You were being prepared to bloom again, and now you have.